Can you believe what just happened in the hockey world? The absolute shock that's sending ripples through every front office, every locker room, and every fan base across the league? We're talking about a development so unexpected, so earth-shattering, that it's making seasoned hockey insiders question everything they thought they knew about player loyalty and championship windows. Connor McDavid. Yes, you heard that correctly. The Edmonton Oilers captain in the face of the NHL may have just sent the strongest signal, yet that his patience with losing is reaching its breaking point. And folks, when a player McDavid's caliber starts showing frustration publicly, that's when general managers around the league start making phone calls they never thought they'd make. The whisper started during Edmonton's latest disappointing loss, but they've now grown into a roar that's impossible to ignore. Sources close to the organization are reporting unprecedented tension between McDavid and management regarding the team's direction. This isn't your typical superstar having a bad game or venting after a tough loss. This is systematic frustration boiling over from years of playoff disappointments and roster construction failures. McDavid's recent comments about needing to evaluate everything weren't throwaway lines delivered in post-game exhaustion. They were calculated statements from a player who's watched other generational talents like Sidney Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin capture multiple championships, while he remains stuck in hockey purgatory despite individual excellence that defies comprehension. The 27-year-old phenom has carried this franchise on his shoulders for nearly a decade, posting video game numbers that would make NHL legends jealous. Yet here we are, another season watching Edmonton struggle with the same fundamental issues that have plagued them since McDavid's arrival. Poor defensive structure, inconsistent goaltending, and questionable depth signings have wasted prime years of the best player on the planet. What makes this situation absolutely explosive is a domino effect of McDavid trade requests will create throughout the entire league. We're not talking about a typical superstar movement here. We're discussing a scenario that would fundamentally reshape the NHL's competitive landscape overnight and force every single franchise to reconsider their championship timeline. The teams with legitimate interests would need to mortgage their entire future just to enter the conversation. The New York Rangers, with their deep prospect pool and salary cap flexibility, have already been mentioned in hushed tones around Madison Square Garden. Their combination of established veterans like Artemi Panarin and Chris Kreider, paired with promising young talent, could provide Edmonton with immediate competitiveness and long-term assets. But here's where it gets really interesting. The teams that nobody expects to be players might have the most compelling offers. The Detroit Red Wings, flush with cap space and desperate to accelerate their rebuild, could present a package that includes multiple first-round picks and their entire prospect cupboard. Steve Yzerman didn't build championship teams in Tampa Bay by being conservative when generational opportunities presented themselves. The psychological warfare aspect cannot be understated either. McDavid's agent has undoubtedly been fielding calls from every contending team's management, creating leverage that could force Edmonton into panic mode. The Oilers' front office knows they're one disappointing playoff exit away from losing the best player they've ever had, and potentially the best player the franchise will ever see. Edmonton's ownership group is facing their worst nightmare scenario. They've invested hundreds of millions in facilities, coaching changes, and roster additions, all built around keeping McDavid happy and competitive. The thought of explaining to their fan base why their generational superstar demanded a trade would be devastating from both business and hockey perspectives. The ripple effects extend far beyond Edmonton's organizational chaos. Teams like the Colorado Avalanche and Florida Panthers, who have structured their rosters around championship windows, would suddenly face pressure to make even more aggressive moves. Nobody wants to waste competitive seasons knowing McDavid might be available to a direct conference rival. The salary cap mathematics make this situation even more fascinating. McDavid's $12.5 million annual salary requires creative maneuvering, but his production justifies every penny and more. Teams would be willing to move multiple contracts and prospects just to accommodate his salary structure, knowing that adding McDavid instantly transforms any roster into a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. What really drives this story is McDavid's competitive fire burning brighter than ever. He's watched Leon Draisaitl carry enormous responsibility, while the supporting cast continues to underperform in crucial moments. The frustration of being the league's best player on a team that can't capitalize on that advantage is eating away at someone who demands excellence from everyone around him. The timing couldn't be more critical either. McDavid is entering what should be his prime championship years, and every season wasted in Edmonton represents an opportunity lost forever. Unlike players who can extend their careers well into their late 30s, McDavid's style relies heavily on explosive speed and agility that naturally decline with age. Recent conversations with former teammates who found success elsewhere have clearly impacted his perspective. Seeing players like Taylor Hall eventually find playoff success after leaving Edmonton sends a message that sometimes individual brilliance isn't enough to overcome organizational shortcomings. The trade deadline implications are staggering to consider. If McDavid becomes available, every other potential trade target becomes secondary. Teams would pivot their entire deadline strategies around acquiring the league's most dominant player, creating unprecedented market dynamics that could inflate prices across the board. For Edmonton, the return package would need to be historically significant. We're talking about multiple first-round picks, established NHL players, and top-tier prospects. Essentially a complete organizational restart built around maximizing McDavid's incredible value. The most intriguing aspect might be McDavid's own decision-making process. Unlike typical trade scenarios where players have limited input, a superstar of his caliber would have significant influence over his destination. This creates fascinating possibilities for teams willing to make the ultimate commitment to championship contention. Whether this becomes reality or remains speculation depends on Edmonton's ability to convince their franchise player that better days are ahead. But the fact that these conversations are even happening demonstrates how quickly championship windows can close when organizational patience runs out. The hockey world is watching, waiting, and preparing for the possibility that the sport's biggest superstar might be changing addresses. If Connor McDavid truly demands a trade, it would represent the most seismic shift in NHL history, instantly reshaping the league's competitive balance for the next decade. What's your take on this absolutely wild possibility? Could you imagine McDavid in a different uniform? And which team would be the perfect fit for hockey's biggest superstar? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and smash that like button if you want more breaking coverage of the NHL's most shocking developments.